Yuyuan, a graduate student in a minority language, was dragged down by a scarred killer whale and drowned while watching a performance. When she woke up, she found herself transformed into a killer whale. At the moment of life and death, he was saved by another killer whale. Yuyuan, who was greedy for life and afraid of death, immediately decided to rely on him. However, this fish brother was cold, proud, and venomous, making it very difficult to approach. Yuyuan could only shamelessly test his bottom line bit by bit. Unexpectedly, this aloof fish brother was actually a romantic brain. Yuyuan, who knew the truth, regretted it deeply, but there was no room for him to play. Fish brother closely followed her and couldn't even shake her off. Fish brother in the early stage. A shameless killer whale like you, I won't care about you. Fish brother in the later stage. I caught a ray for you. As long as you're not angry with me, I'll give you something to eat. Yuyuan. What did you say? Fish brother. Respected whale group leader, I specifically went to catch a ray. Would you like to taste it? As he spoke, he flattered Yuyuan and acted coquettishly. You manage me, Yuan. Novel keyword. When I wake up, I am violently beaten by a killer whale. No pop-ups, when I wake up, I'm beaten by a killer whale. Download the complete set of TXT. When I woke up, I was brutally beaten by a killer whale. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Became a killer whale. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Became a killer whale. Yuyuan opened her eyes in a daze, and what caught her eye was a deep, bottomless blue. A colorful fish, only the size of her thumb, slowly swam past her, bringing up a string of small, delicate bubbles. Where is this? Why is there water everywhere? Didn't I just be dragged underwater by the killer whale at the aquarium? Are you dreaming? No, it's not right. The intense pain caused by the collision in her body and the suffocation and drowning sensation in her chest seemed to still exist, constantly telling the truth of what she had experienced before becoming unconscious. So she's still alive. Yuyuan's eyeballs flickered, and his brain was still pondering dully about where this was. In the moment he turned his head, he was instantly frightened and lost all 7 souls. Shark. Shark. About 15 meters away from her, a massive great white shark was swinging its body and quickly charging towards her. Her mouth was filled with sharp teeth that magnified infinitely in her eyes. The originally confused brain suddenly woke up, and Yuyuan turned around without thinking and wanted to run, but was surprised to find that she had no legs. Instead, there are 2 broad black and thick fish fins. What is this thing? Has she turned into a fish? Watching the shark getting closer and closer to her, Yuyuan ignored everything else and struggled to wriggle his body in the opposite direction. After a struggle, Yuyuan was finally able to swim forward at an extremely slow speed. However, this speed could be considered optional for the shark behind her, who rushed towards her in the blink of an eye. Yuyuan, who was easily caught, could only watch helplessly as the other party opened their mouths and bit her stomach hard. The pain of her skin being torn made Yuyuan burst into tears, frantically wriggling her body to break free, and even helping her tear off a piece of flesh from her body. Taking advantage of the gap when the other party swallowed the meat into their mouth, Yuyuan could only endure the pain and continue to twist his body, casually finding a direction and charging straight with a heavy head. Then, without any accidents, he was fiercely bitten by a great white shark chasing after him. The skin and flesh were quickly torn apart, leaving a huge wound. Yuyuan was so painful that he couldn't move and could only lie down weakly, watching in despair as the other party opened his chest and pierced his stomach. At this moment, a huge black shadow suddenly rushed out from beside and fiercely collided with Yuyuan and the great white shark. A violent impact, Yuyuan's 5 organs and 6 viscera were about to be displaced by the collision. What is this, other sharks? Yuyuan's face was filled with tears of despair, but the next second she realized that the great white shark, which had just been crazily biting her, had already flipped its belly and vigorously twisted its body next to her, trying to turn over. Immediately after, the black shadow that had just emerged kept rushing towards the great white shark, biting its tail and making it unable to flip its body. Only then did Yuyuan be able to see the true face of this huge black shadow on Mount Lu, a black and white, massive killer whale. The great white shark in his mouth was still struggling to bite him, but he grabbed it and violently shook its body, then tightly pressed it down. Yuyuan stared at everything in front of her with a stiff body, afraid to move even a single moment, afraid of startling the killer whale and causing her death. This killer whale is clearly much larger than the great white shark, and its swimming speed is also much faster than the great white shark. But she couldn't even run away from the great white shark, and it was even more impossible for her to run away from this killer whale. What to do? What to do? A series of twists and turns left Yuyuan's brain in chaos, unable to think calmly. In the end, uncontrollably, what was taught on TV when watching the animal world before. When encountering wild animals but unable to escape, one can choose to pretend to be dead. Some wild animals do not eat carrion. By the way, pretend to be dead. Her cheap younger brother is a passionate fan of marine animals, sitting in front of the TV every day watching the Animal Science Popularization channel on time. Speaking of which, if it weren't for accompanying him to play in the ocean park, she wouldn't have fallen into being chased and bitten by great white sharks. At that time, the child insisted on going to watch a killer whale performance. When it was time to interact with the killer whale, he suddenly grabbed the keeper's clothes and pointed to the killer whale in the pool, saying, "Its dorsal fin is curved, they are not happy, their home is not here." Yuyuan really instinctively glanced at the eyes of the killer whale under by Ban, and was instantly shocked by the various emotions filled inside. She still remembers deeply, her eyes filled with numbness, pain, and despair, and then in a daze, she only heard a hoarse shout. "I want to go home." The next second, he was dragged into the pool by a killer whale and eventually suffocated into a coma. When I woke up again, I was already in the sea. Forcefully suppressing the complex and bitter emotions in his heart, Yuyuan learned the way the fish in the fish tank flipped their belly. With a twist of his body, his white belly turned upwards, his head tilted back, and he remained completely motionless. End of this chapter. 2. Chapter 2 Disguising Dead Tiger Whale. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Disguising Dead Tiger Whale. The killer whale on the side pressed down on the great white shark, making it unable to turn over, but its gaze never left Yuyuan's side for a moment. When I saw the other person flipping over their belly without hesitation and hovering in the water, there was an undisguised disgust in their eyes. From the beginning, he has been watching from the side. This killer whale was originally suspended in the water without moving. He thought it was some unlucky guy who died from a bacterial infection, but to his surprise, it was still alive. A majestic adult killer whale was chased around by great white sharks, and its clumsy parade style was even more ridiculous than those clumsy turtles with limited mobility. He had originally planned to just watch her being bitten to death by a great white shark, but he didn't expect her to scream so well. The sharp scream pierced into his brain, causing him a headache. As a hegemon in the ocean, even in the face of death, one must remain calm and composed. He has never seen such a startled killer whale before. Under the unbearable argument, he ultimately chose to save her, not expecting to see such a scene. What is this, pretending to be dead? It's simply embarrassing. Yuyuan pretended to be dead while crazily contemplating her current situation. Just now she quickly looked at herself. Her body size was not small, at least not the kind of fish in the river that can only grow up to over 1 meter at the maximum. Roughly estimated, it was about 6 or 7 meters long. This body type can definitely be considered a predator even in the sea, not a small fish or shrimp being eaten. This secretly relieved Yuyuan. As long as she didn't encounter fierce predators like sharks, she could at least intimidate most of the fish with her body size, so that she wouldn't be eaten quickly. Well, if the killer whale in front of her doesn't want to eat dead fish, she still has a chance to live. Calm down, the dawn of hope is right ahead. Continuing to observe oneself with great effort, I couldn't see my whole body. All I could see was my tail and the fins on both sides of my body, with white underneath and black above. It looks very familiar. Yuyuan dared to sneak a glance at the killer whale next to him, which was still pressing down on the shark and making it unable to turn over. His gaze moved silently upstream of the shark's fins and tail. Confirmed, very similar. Is it? Yuyuan boldly guessed that he was a killer whale of the same species as the opponent. So was the other party just rushing over to save her? Yuyuan was shocked by her bold conjecture, but she dared not act rashly. What if she guessed wrong and the other person bit her to death? For the sake of conservatism, it's better to continue pretending to be dead. This killer whale seems to be much larger in size than herself, and Yuyuan conservatively estimates that it should be over 9 meters, almost 10 meters. Listening to the sound just now, it should be a male. A male killer whale. After experiencing multiple stimuli that were unimaginable even in her dreams, Yuyuan no longer found it strange that she could understand male killer whales speaking. She has become a whale like the other person, so it's not surprising that she can understand what the other person is saying, but it's unclear if they can understand what she's saying. Yuyuan brainstormed in her mind while secretly observing the movements of male killer whales. I saw the great white shark twist its body in the end, then completely lose its movement. After the killer whale loosened its mouth, its body stiffened and floated motionless in the water. It looks like it's already dead. Watching the killer whale casually throw the great white shark aside and swim towards him, Yuyuan quickly closed his eyes and didn't dare to move. A heart-wrenching roar. Don't come over. The male killer whale looked at the other person's inquisitive eyes and looked around stealthily. Then, he closed his eyes in front of himself and felt his eyelids twitch. He coldly said, "Open your eyes." Yuyuan's heart trembled. Who is this talking to? Are you talking to her? She's exposed. Before knowing the other party's purpose, Yuyuan was prepared to remain motionless, so he still lay motionless in the water, flipping his belly like a dead fish. Keep pretending to be dead with thick skin. The killer whale ran out of patience and turned around. With a powerful flick of its massive tail, it hit Yuyuan's head. Dense bubbles appear out of thin air in the water. Yuyuan felt dizzy from the impact and crashed towards her, her body plummeting violently with the slap of the killer whale's tail. At the same time, a voice that was even colder in tone than before rang out again. Open your eyes. Yuyuan finally confirmed that the other person was talking to her. In order to prevent being beaten again, she had no choice but to open her eyes, turn her body around, and face the cold eyes of the other person, flattering and saying, "Big brother, don't hit me. My own person. Ah no, my own whale. Why is it strange?" After thinking for a moment, Yuyuan quickly changed his mind. Fish on your own, don't fight, don't fight. She had just become a whale and didn't even know how to control her volume. A series of pleas for mercy in the ears of male killer whales were just a few decibels of gibberish. The male killer whale, who was already being noisy and had to save such a cowardly whale, didn't even think about it, but turned around and swung his big tail over again. Yuyuan was instantly hit by a fan and rolled twice in the sea. The wound on her stomach torn by a great white shark was so painful that she cramped all over and lost all her strength in an instant. The intense pain made Yuyuan's brain tangle, forcing his Taiwanese accent out. It took him a while to catch his breath, and he couldn't control the pain. He began to speak softly and said the classic line in frustration. "Big brother, they all said it's my own fish. My stomach has been bitten and my skin is bare. Why do I still need sauce?" I only realized what I had said after speaking out loud. Oh, my goodness, isn't this a blatant provocation? Thinking that the original protagonist of this line almost got cut off again after saying it, Yuyuan wished he could slap himself in the face. As the male killer whale swung its tail and was about to charge, it suddenly lifted its fins and hugged its huge whale head, closing its eyes and shouting. "Don't hit me, fish brother. Stay alive at the bottom of the tail. Fish brother." Yuyuan was so scared that she dared not open her eyes. Her voice was so loud that it was deafening. She hugged her head and wished to roll herself into a fish ball, ready to face the opponent's beating. After a long time, the intense impact did not come. Just as Yuyuan felt that his heart was about to beat too fast and die, Lang Buting heard the other person's cold snort. Trembling slightly, he opened his eyes and realized that the male killer whale had turned around and swam towards the body of the nearby great white shark. Yuyuan watched as the other party swiftly tore open the stomach of the great white shark, devouring its internal organs. The red shark followed the dense waves of water and shivered uncontrollably. The wound on the stomach seemed to have been torn open, and it was getting more and more painful. "I don't know if killer whales eat their own kind," Yuyuan muttered in a low voice, making sure that the other party had no intention of attacking or eating him, before quietly letting out a sigh of relief. Finally, he could calm down and think about what he would do next, in order to make the other party give up treating him as an extra meal. "My memory was still stuck in the ocean tube when I was dragged down by killer whales. When I woke up, it was here. Unexpectedly, I wasn't even a person anymore and turned into a fish. Oh, that's not right either. It went directly from a land mammal to a marine mammal." Although Yuyuan, who had read a series of novels proficiently, was shocked by this, it did not reach an unacceptable level. Everything she had just experienced made her certain that she was in the sea, because the surrounding waters were so wide that she couldn't see the edges, and the aquarium wasn't that big. This male killer whale has a very robust body, and when it swims, the surrounding water is driven by it, which is very powerful and completely incomparable to its round and thin body shape. Those two tails just now, the other party probably didn't use all their strength, otherwise Yuyuan probably had a concussion by now. His dorsal fin is straight at a 90-degree angle, black and shiny, very beautiful, and incomparable to those killer whales in the aquarium. There is a large scar on the body that extends from the lateral fins to the tail, indicating the severity of the injury at the time. Yuyuan has no understanding of killer whales at all, and the only useful knowledge he has is that his younger brother Qin constantly talks in front of him every day while holding a killer whale doll. I vaguely remembered him saying that killer whales are social animals, with a large family and great love for their families. Is the other party her family? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Lonely Tiger Whale Without Family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Lonely Tiger Whale Without Family. In this unknown sea area, Yuyuan does not believe that he can survive. With the protection of his family, the probability of survival will greatly increase. Yuyuan thought this way and secretly glanced at the male killer whale next to him, forcing himself to overcome his fear. He cautiously moved towards the other person, preparing to get close to them. She struggled to twist her body and cautiously approached the killer whale. "Fish brother, you. Oh." As she spoke, she rubbed against the male killer whale. Unexpectedly, just 2 meters away from him, the male killer whale suddenly slammed his tail hard on Yuyuan's body, moving her a few meters away. The area hit by the tail was tingling with pain, and the male killer whale looked at Yuyuan with warning eyes and said in disgust, "Stay away from me, you're too ugly." Ugly. Yuyuan only felt that she couldn't catch a breath. When she was a person, she was not only a stunning beauty, but also one of the best in her life circle. At least no one said she was ugly. And killer whales are all black and white, everyone is the same, why should he say he's ugly? Besides, it's really impolite to say, "You're too ugly," to the lady. Yuyuan held his breath and was about to speak, only to find that his previous breath was really unbearable. A suffocating sensation filled his whole body, and his chest began to ache. The indifferent killer whale in front of him turned into a phantom and began to sway left and right, opening his mouth to breathe. He only sucked in water. The familiar sense of hypoxia and suffocation became increasingly severe, and Yuyuan felt a sudden blackness in front of him. In the eerie gaze of the male killer whale, Yuyuan finally exhausted his last bit of strength. I don't know how long it has been. A huge sound of water breaking echoed in his ears, and the coolness of his skin exposed to the air awakened a faint consciousness of Yuyuan, who was almost unconscious. With a strong will to survive, Yuyuan breathed hard. But this time, what I sucked in was no longer the salty seawater, but the fresh air that was bulging loudly. Yuyuan used all her strength to greedily breathe, and the numbness in her body gradually faded away, making her vision and senses clearer. She only then realized that the male killer whale lifted itself up with its massive body and pushed itself out of the water. My face pressed tightly against the smooth back of the other person, feeling their strong body breaking through the waves, and a sense of security floated uncontrollably in Yuyuan's heart. The male killer whale's huge tail swayed up and down, slowly swimming on the sea surface with Yuyuan on its back. Yuyuan was finally able to see the sea. Besides the sea, it's still the sea. Apart from the turbulent sea, there was only a deep blue sky that caught her eye. She didn't see the coastline she wanted to see, not even the islands. They are located in the center of the sea. You are the first killer whale I have ever seen that will drown in seawater. The voice of the male killer whale came from Yuyuan's body, and his tone was no longer the same as before, but still with a hint of melancholy. Yuyuan twisted his body on his back, and then the male killer whale's stomata sprayed a mist of water, slowly sinking behind her. The sky disappeared once again, replaced by endless sea water. As soon as he sank into the water, the male killer whale threw Yuyuan off his body. Yuyuan let him throw herself aside, feeling muffled and silent. From waking up to find herself in the bottomless sea, and then transforming from a human to a killer whale, she always felt like she was dreaming without any sense of reality. Until just now I saw the sea surface. She only then realized deeply that she was no longer a human. Everything that humanity possessed had gone with the ups and downs of the sea, and now she was a killer whale. A killer whale living in the sea. She no longer has friends or family, and has to face her completely unfamiliar sea and unknown dangers alone. But she had even experienced 2 deaths in just over 10 minutes, and the wounds torn from her by the great white shark were still in severe pain, reminding her of the cruelty of the environment she is currently in. Everything in the future has become elusive, and she even finds it difficult to survive. The male killer whale lowered its gaze at her for a while, then scanned her curved dorsal fin before finally speaking in a calm voice. I don't know how you escaped from that place. You don't seem to have that ability, but since you escaped, you can only face reality. No humans here will provide you with food, and you do not belong to any group of killer whales. You have no family, and if you want to survive, you can only rely on yourself. Otherwise, you will have to be buried in the sea. Yuyuan's pupils shrank and he looked at him blankly. I don't have family. The male killer whale wagged its tail. You have been away from the sea for so long, and even if you can still find your family, they may not recognize you. If you are lucky, a group of killer whales may accept you again, but you have no blood relationship with them, so be prepared to be ignored. Yuyuan's brain was in chaos. Upon hearing what this killer whale was saying, was her original body actually a killer whale captured by humans? But how did he know? Yuyuan originally thought he would have a group of killer whales and gradually adapt to his current life as a killer whale under the care of his family, but he didn't expect to have any family at all. So whether as a human or a killer whale, she couldn't feel the warmth of home and has always been lonely. After the male killer whale finished speaking these words, he no longer intended to stay, wagged his tail and prepared to leave. Before leaving, he only left one sentence for Yuyuan. I hope you can live on. Yuyuan didn't even have time to stop him, so he could only watch helplessly as he gradually disappeared into the boundless sea. I haven't had time to say goodbye yet. Yuyuan murmured softly. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Hungry Tiger Whales. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Hungry tiger whales. She froze in the seawater in such a daze, until the suffocation came again, and then she vigorously twisted her body and floated out of the sea. Who? Yuyuan breathed heavily in the air and saw the endless ocean again, his eyes gradually becoming firm. It doesn't matter if you don't have family, friends can also get to know each other again, anyway she has already gotten used to it. She just changed her living environment, as long as she still has a breath, she will work hard to survive. Upon this thought, Yuyuan suddenly felt that the sky was clear and life became hopeful. After taking a breath, she sank back into the sea and began to reminisce vigorously about the killer whale knowledge shared by her younger brother in the ocean management. I am Xiaoqiang, the huge Xiaoqiang in the sea. Yuyuan hummed an out-of-tune while struggling to splash in the water. She is not familiar with the sea, nor is she familiar with her own body. This has a great impact on her survival. At least she needs to find ways to understand her body, understand what she can do, in order to fully utilize limited conditions and strive for survival. Firstly, it is important to control one's ventilation frequency. Yuyuan struggled to search through the memories in his mind, finally blurring the idea from his distant memory that his younger brother Qin had once held a toy with a killer whale. He spoke seriously. Tiger whales are not fish, they are mammals in the sea. They belong to the family Delphinidae, which is equivalent to giant dolphins. They need to float on the surface to breathe, with a ventilation frequency of about 15 minutes. Yuyuan breathed a sigh of relief and sighed inwardly, thanking himself for patiently listening to him talk about his favorite marine creatures at that time. Otherwise, now his eyes were really dark and he didn't know anything. Because Yuyuan cannot swim as agile as a normal killer whale, she can only stay 3 to 5 meters away from the sea surface. Enable oneself to float to the surface and breathe in a timely manner. She also dared not leave this water area, because she did not know what other giant creatures would hide in this deep sea. Only in this sea area, there were great white sharks first, and then male killer whales passing by, so it would be temporarily safe. Recalling the movement of the male killer whale just now, Yuyuan tentatively swung his tail and opened his side fins. As the tail swings, the body gradually begins to move forward, much easier than just twisting the body to move. Yuyuan's surprise flashed through her heart, feeling that she had found the right direction, so she increased the range of tail manipulation. Hiss. Overwhelmed with pride, she forgot that the wound torn by the great white shark was still lingering on her stomach, as her movements were being pulled and a piercing pain made her lose all her strength in an instant, and she could only collapse on the sea surface. Yuyuan's wound bled again, and the reddened seawater spread out before her eyes, flowing into her eyes. Don't move anymore, otherwise the blood will flow more and more, and it will soon attract predators around. A severely injured killer whale may not be seen as a sea hegemon by those predators, but as a huge piece of food. At that time, she will be torn apart and eaten into her stomach. Yuyuan could only give up on continuing to study and march in frustration, and began to aimlessly observe the surrounding sea. Suddenly, his stomach became sore, and hunger surged in his heart. Later, Yuyuan realized. She not only needs to consider movement, but also needs to consider replenishing energy and finding something to eat. Otherwise, if she hadn't learned how to march yet, she would have starved to death. Moreover, she still had such serious wounds on her body that she didn't have the energy to maintain her bodily functions, and the wounds would have worsened. There is no hospital in the sea, let alone medication. Once the wound worsens, even if there are no predators attacking her now, she cannot escape the word death. The water in this sea area is not too deep, at least Yuyuan can see the blurry seabed, conservatively estimated to be about 120 meters, with many fish and shrimp. But these little fish and shrimp will avoid her from a distance and dare not approach her at all. To fill her stomach, Yuyuan had to go and grab it herself. But she can't move at high speed now. Without speed, her massive body will become clumsy and sluggish. After biting into the air again, Yuyuan completely gave up, and the newly chased snapper swung its tail and left leisurely beside her eyes. The small string of bubbles formed by the flick of her tail seemed like a mockery of her incompetence. Watching the other party happily swim further and further, there were no more fish to catch in the surrounding waters. And after just catching up, Yuyuan had completely lost his strength, and the wound on his stomach was getting more and more painful, constantly oozing red blood. If this continues, she is afraid to lose too much blood and die. Kidney deficiency often occurs after overwork. Although she tried hard to stand up, Yuyuan felt as if she had been tired for 3 days and nights and couldn't stand up. Yusheng is so hard that she is completely discouraged. Her fighting spirit has just dissipated. Now she just wants to lie in the sea and die as an equal. If Fish Brother comes back, he might be able to see her body. Fish Brother, you really want to thank me. In just 1 day, not only did you see a drowned killer whale, but you also saw a starving killer whale. At the brink of death, there was a lot of nonsense. Yuyuan leaned back and couldn't control his fragmented thoughts. Oh, if I die like a whale, it will benefit millions of fish. I will be the most sumptuous and delicious buffet today. Even my stomach has been prepared for them. Humanized service is unique, and there are no more branches. Ah! Will they crawl into my stomach, bite my intestines, and eat my organs before I die? It hurts so much. As soon as Yuyuan thought about the miserable situation before her death, she felt that she had already begun to feel pain. Woo-woo. It hurts so much. I have never done anything wrong in my life. I have only eaten chicken, duck, fish, and meat, stepped on ants, snatched lunch from classmates, and scolded the boss. Why did you treat me like this? Woo-woo-woo. Crabs will come to pinch my eyeballs, rays will bite my tail roots, sharks will come. Sharks. Yuyuan turned his body forward, his eyes bursting with enthusiasm. How could she forget about this mess? The great white shark that Fish Brother bit to death hasn't finished yet. She has been afraid to leave this water area, so why not turn back and take a look? The water depth is only about 100 meters now, and even if the great white shark sinks to the bottom, she can catch it and take a bite. With this thought in mind, Yuyuan quickly turned around and swam towards the place where the body of the great white shark was located. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Tiger whales eating shark urinary organs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Tiger whales eating shark urinary organs. Hurry up, don't let those little fish and shrimp finish making it for her then. She can still catch her hot mouth when she goes now. Yuyuan endured the pain in her stomach and sprinted for 100 meters. Thank goodness, Yuyuan looked at the body of the great white shark still floating in place and felt like tears were streaming down her face. It seems that heaven still favors her. Quickly swimming to the side of the body, the small fish and shrimp that were originally eating meat on the body of the great white shark scattered and became empty in an instant. 2 small fish even directly collided with Yuyuan's face. Yuyuan wagged her tail with regret. I thought I could add a meal. Who knew I was running so fast? Forget it, let them have a way to survive. Yuyuan lowered her head and finally could clearly observe the nearly 5-meter-long great white shark. This body size is considered large among great white sharks, but unfortunately it's not enough to look at in front of that male killer whale. Thinking that the other party was exceptionally skilled in killing the shark and then eating up all the internal organs in his stomach, Yuyuan felt his stomach twitch and start to ache again. A gentleman does not eat the food he has received, murmured Yuyuan to himself, but the next second took it for granted. This is leftover food that I picked up based on my abilities. Why not eat it? Besides, I'm not a gentleman, I'm just a poor killer whale. They just want to fill their stomachs, so what's wrong with them? With such a thought, there is simply no psychological burden. Lowering his head, he met the murky bean eyes of the great white shark. The originally bright eyes were covered in a layer of dead color, his belly was wide open, and a piece of unfinished intestine was drifting in the sea with the waves. There are dark red blood streaks seeping out with the seawater. This ferocious and gloomy appearance made her lose all appetite, but she had no choice but to live on. Eat, after eating and drinking, you will become a good whale again. After being mentally prepared again and again, Yuyuan closed her eyes, opened her mouth, and bit hard. That is an indescribable taste that comes from hell. It was sour and astringent, fishy and lewd, almost instantly filling the entire mouth, stimulating Yuyuan's uncontrollable nausea. Just as I was about to swallow it regardless of whether it was raw or not, the shark's skin was as hard and difficult to bite as if it was going to be against her. It took a lot of effort to tear it open. Over time, the indescribable taste in her mouth could no longer dissipate, charging straight towards Yuyuan's spiritual cover, making her wish she had died on the spot. Nausea. Yuyuan endured it for a while, but finally couldn't resist. He arched his huge body and vomited with a heart-wrenching sensation. It's too unpleasant. If it weren't for being in the sea, the tears she was forced to shed by that smell would have covered her entire killer whale face. Shoo! Suddenly, a mocking sneer echoed from behind, and it reached Yuyuan's ears in a moderate manner. Yuyuan was startled and suddenly turned around. Just as she was about to bite her open mouth, she let out a painful scream from the wound on her stomach. Go on. Listening to this scream, the other party fell completely silent and remained silent, watching Yuyuan roll in the sea with his teeth bared, his black tail swaying up and down, tearing the wound more and more severely. Yuyuan finally saw the person coming in clearly. Oh no, come fish. He couldn't help but open his eyes wide and shouted. Fish brother. The voice was mournful, 3 parts surprised, 4 parts fearful, 2 parts shocked, and 1 part joyful. Yuyuan dared not move anymore. As soon as she saw Yugu, she would uncontrollably brainstorm. How did the good end come back? When did she appear behind her? What are you doing back here? Can't it be? Isn't it, sir? So stingy, don't you even want her to eat leftovers? Still that terrible leftover food. The killer whale's face was expressionless, but this did not prevent the male killer whale from seeing Yuyuan's guarded and incredulous expression from her round, dripping eyes. This killer whale is acting strangely and foolishly. The male killer whale can even guess what the other person is thinking without even thinking, and can't help but sneer. Not all killer whales eat everything like you, I don't eat this thing. Yuyuan breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the other party was not here to cause trouble for him, so he took advantage of the situation and explored the text. Well. Brother look, can I? Looking at her bewildered expression, the male killer whale knew she could understand her meaning. With a twist of his eyes, he suddenly began to tease her and asked in a pretentious tone. Do you know why I don't eat this thing? Yuyuan shook his head very honestly. I don't know. Suddenly, it occurred to me that if brother you were willing to take her with him, besides anything else, at least my life could be saved. I couldn't help but think a few thoughts. When will it be better not to flatter at this time? So Yuyuan said extremely obsequiously. I know now, of course it's fish brother. Your hunting skills are very advanced, and you don't like these scraps anymore. How can you fill your stomach with such an ugly and unpleasant shark? Just flattering is not enough, you have to pretend to be pitiful. So, Yuyuan's tone changed and she felt like crying. But fish brother, he doesn't have your good skills and has been injured. He can't go hunting, so he can only pick up some leftovers from others' food. Then the voice was impassioned and full of emotion. Fish brother, you are so kind. You are willing to share the remaining meat with me. You are the kindest killer whale in the world. Have you heard me, brother? I praise you so much with a fragrant tea aroma. It's hard to justify not giving me this leftover meat, right? She leaned over to the male killer whale as she spoke, lifting her side fins to pat her, but thought that a slap from her big tail could shake her brain. In the end, she gave up and instead called out in a friendly and rhythmic tone. Fish brother, you're so kind. Then the corners of his eyes twitched and he gave the other person a seductive look. The male killer whale became even more silent, watching Yuyuan wriggling his body left and right as if he had a cramp in the corner of his eyes, feeling a bit spicy. The few words just now seemed like flattery, but no matter how he listened, he felt a bit sinister inside. Unfortunately, the other person still had a flattering expression, as if he was very sincere. This tone and demeanor almost instantly reminded him of the two-legged monster on land. What is its name? Oh, human. The selfish and hypocritical species either capture them and slaughter them recklessly, or they are kept in narrow cages for entertainment, constantly waving whips to force them to make specific movements. The loud noise torments them all day long, wishing they could hear nothing. For the sake of so-called scientific research, various drugs were injected into their bodies to help them escape from seawater and experience suffocation. Finally, they were cut open with a butcher's knife, and their bones and flesh were cut off. Some were soaked in large glass jars filled with medicine, while others shaved off their flesh to the bone and hung for display in the hall. Thanks to the blessings of these humans, he was also forced to learn the body structure, lifestyle, and living environment of various organisms in the ocean. Although these things always allow him to accurately find food and avoid most dangers to survive alone in the sea, they still cannot conceal the pain and disaster that those humans have brought to this ocean. He couldn't forget the blood and mournful cries in his memory, as well as the pain inflicted on him by humans. The killer whale in front of me knows nothing, has no survival ability, is innocent and foolish, and its words and actions are completely different from those of killer whales in the sea. It is a deformed product of those humans. Unfortunately, she was completely confused and unaware that she couldn't survive in this ocean, which was both pitiful and tragic. Watching Yuyuan sway left and right for food and crave shark meat that ordinary killer whales don't even eat, male killer whales no longer have the intention of teasing. She should have been the proud son of heaven in the sea, but now she is so embarrassed. The male killer whale said coldly. Don't you know that sharks urinate through their skin? What? Yuyuan's brain froze in an instant, and she stared in place with her mouth wide open. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Tiger whales fed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Tiger whales fed under the blue sky and white sun. There was such a terrifying thing that Yuyuan's brain crashed on the spot, and the next second he felt his stomach churning. Nausea. Yuyuan felt nauseous from being stimulated, and then immediately felt the pain of muscle tightening and pulling on the wound, which was unbearable. Finally, lying on the brink of death in the water. Male killer whales are a bit puzzled. Even if you don't know what organ shark skin is, a normal killer whale mother will teach her child not to eat it unless absolutely necessary. The killer whale family has a unique knowledge inheritance, and the older leader of the killer whale pack will pass on some knowledge and hunting skills about the ocean to the younger generation of killer whales. When the old killer whale passed away and the new leader ascended to power, they would repeat the practices of the previous generation, passing down the knowledge and skills accumulated by the tribe from generation to generation. So many little killer whales learn a lot of knowledge from their mothers or grandmothers, and then survive in the ocean. But then, thinking of Yuyuan's uniqueness, the male killer whale stopped talking. Is it because I was forced to separate from my mother since I was young? It's also possible to be even worse. Her mother was caught from a young age and didn't have time to follow her grandmother's teachings, so she didn't even know about her mother. Looking at Yuyuan lying flat with no attachment, it seemed as if some sad past had been stirred up, motionless. The male killer whale unconsciously swung its lateral fins and after a brief silence, awkwardly shifted its gaze away. Most shark skins are tough and prone to wear and tear on our teeth. Teeth are precious and can only grow once in a lifetime. If they fall out, they will disappear. Without teeth is like losing most of our chances of survival, especially for single killer whales like you, the danger will greatly increase. If you encounter delicious food, it's understandable that it's a bit difficult to bite, but shark meat is a type of steak. As Yuyuan's abdominal muscles began to twitch again, the male killer whale fell silent. This kind of unpleasant food is not enough to make you pay the price of teeth being worn out to eat. Yuyuan was so painful that she couldn't speak anymore. Hearing these words made her feel bitter, but she couldn't speak. It's not that she wants to eat, it's just that she can only eat that. Woo fish brother, how can you, a skilled hunter, understand the pain in the hearts of us little brats? Suddenly, a wave of water shook around her. Yuyuan struggled to lift her eyes and only saw the back of the male killer whale leaving. She struggled to open her mouth. Fish brother. Don't leave yet, fish brother. It has to be said that after confirming that the other party had no intention of attacking, the male killer whale brought Yuyuan a lot of security. Located in a vast expanse of water, with all eyes on unfamiliar environments, male killer whales can be considered the only non-threatening and familiar existence. Although it is difficult to guarantee that the other party will suddenly turn around, Yuyuan still wants to see him. At this moment, seeing the other person leave, an indescribable sense of loss surged in my heart, but then I shook my head. In fact, she could easily sense the other party's disgust towards her, and she was not foolish. The killer whale can be called the king of the sea in the sea. It is normal for the other party to become accustomed to seeing their powerful and domineering peers, and suddenly to see themselves so unremarkable. Due to family reasons since childhood, Yuyuan's carefree personality hides an extremely sensitive heart, making it easy to sense the attitudes of everyone around her towards her. Friendly, malicious, indifferent, but now Yuyuan was in so much pain that she couldn't think of anything else. She lay in the water, half asleep and half awake, and after a while, suddenly a wave of water shook around her. Effortlessly lifting his eyes, the blurry gaze gradually focused, and the male killer whale reappeared before his eyes. It held a broken ray in its mouth and casually threw it in front of Yuyuan, arching its head forward, which was self-evident. Yuyuan's eyes lit up rapidly, and he looked at him with a burning gaze. Fish. Fish brother. Are you sure? Her eager and sparkling eyes forced the male killer whale to retreat one after another, and she awkwardly averted her gaze and let out a small, imperceptible "hmm." But Yuyuan didn't hear it and excitedly confirmed again. Are you really willing, brother you? A hint of embarrassment flashed in the male killer whale's eyes, and he turned his head and glared fiercely at Yuyuan, muttering in a muffled voice. What have you been doing so many times? Don't you want to eat? Think about it. Yuyuan responded repeatedly, afraid that the other party would retract, and opened his mouth to bite the meat that was delivered to his eyes. I don't know if it's because I turned into a killer whale that my taste buds changed. The soft ray meat not only didn't have the expected fishy smell, but was incredibly tender. Yuyuan's eyes lit up and he quickly began to feast on it. In a hurry, he didn't forget to casually bring this delicious meal to the laborer. Woo, this is also too delicious. Thank you, fish brother. You are so kind, fish brother. Everyone likes rainbow farts, and killer whales are no exception. The male killer whale's eyes flashed with a hint of softness that he didn't even notice. He cleared his throat and continued. I'm not sympathizing with you, it's just because I said something bad to you earlier. This is an apology. Yuyuan's mouth was filled with meat, and he looked up in confusion amidst his busy schedule. What? Bad words. Did he just mention it? Watching Yuyuan stuffing his mouth full of meat, the slender tail of the ray still hanging outside, swaying left and right with Yuyuan's chewing movements. The male killer whale's eyes were full of complexity. "It's nothing, you keep eating. How long has it been since you last ate something?" Until Yuyuan swallowed the last bite of meat into his stomach, then contentedly flipped his belly and raised one side fin to touch it, the male killer whale finally said. "Alright, you've eaten the food too. I'll leave first." Yuyuan turned over and looked at him in a daze. "Oh." The male killer whale looked at Yuyuan with extremely complex eyes. Seeing her foolish and confused appearance, the possibility of surviving in the sea was almost zero. Perhaps the next time he returned to this sea area, he would see her body. However, the ocean itself is cruel, with advantages of the fittest and weak meat being strong. Even killer whales, who are the masters of the ocean, inevitably die, and all living beings are not special. Thinking of this, the male killer whale didn't say anything anymore. He waved his side fins and turned around to leave. After swimming for a while, the male killer whale suddenly noticed something following behind him. He squinted his eyes and a cold color flashed in his eyes, then turned back suddenly. End of this chapter. 7. Octopus Brother, Can I Follow You? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Octopus Brother 7, Can I follow you? Apart from scattered bubbles, there is nothing. A moment of contemplation flashed in the eyes of the male killer whale, and then his gaze shifted downwards. As expected, a huge black figure was struggling to roll himself up, timidly sinking into the water 2 to 3 meters below him. To be honest, although she can be considered a malnourished little figure in a group of killer whales, she is not so small that she can completely hide her existence just by sinking a few meters. The male killer whale experienced an unknown number of silences today, and even if he pretended to be blind, he couldn't cooperate with the other party to complete the scene. After hesitating for a while, he still pretended not to see and turned around to continue swimming in the original direction. Yuyuan watched as the other person turned around, feeling a surge of joy in her heart. She wagged her tail and continued to dodge and follow. In fact, she didn't think that male killer whales wouldn't notice her at all. She's not brainless. With her large body size, there are no water plants or reefs around her to avoid. The superb hunting skills of male killer whales make it impossible for them not to be discovered. Yuyuan just wanted to test it out. If the male killer whale doesn't have a strong reaction, she can follow him closely, at least in a short period of time, to obtain a relatively safe environment. In order to give her wounds some time to heal, she needs to seize every opportunity that increases her chances of survival. I didn't expect the male killer whale to react unexpectedly well. Not only did he not drive her away, but he even acquiesced. As for why he pretended to dodge and evade, Yuyuan could only say that everyone is a marine predator, wary of each other, especially this male killer whale, who appears to have a strong personality and doesn't seem to tolerate threats following him. In that case, she can only minimize her threat to the greatest extent possible, at least creating a false impression. What else is a whale setting that is more harmless than a simple-minded and clumsy killer whale setting? No, there must be no. Yuyuan couldn't help but give a thumbs up for her cleverness and wit. The first tiger whale movie queen was me. The male killer whale swam forward while silently observing Yuyuan behind him. It was evident that the shark bite had a significant impact on her, and she did not dare to vigorously swing her tail. Although she had tried her best to conceal it, the painful moans that occasionally squeezed out from between her teeth still penetrated his ears. Tiger whales have excellent hearing and rely more on sonar systems than their eyes. Through sonar, they can perceive things far away. At present, Yuyuan's gasping sound continued to penetrate his ears, and the male killer whale did not expect to start pretending to be deaf after pretending to be blind. I feel a bit restless in my heart. He knew that the unproductive killer whale was following him to seek shelter, but he didn't want to carry a burden. What he had given her to eat before was just a momentary pity, and no matter how much else he did, it exceeded his limits and he had no intention of doing it at all. With this thought in mind, the male killer whale opened its lateral fins, increased the intensity of its tail swing, and its swimming speed instantly soared. Yuyuan was originally secretly pleased that Yugu had a hard mouth and a soft heart, but the next second he became dumbfounded. I saw Fish Brother's huge tail fanning up dense bubbles, and then his graceful body rushed out like an arrow leaving the string. In the blink of an eye, it had already jumped out for several tens of meters. Yuyuan had to rise up and chase after him, enduring the pain and swinging his tail. However, the speed of the other party is not something she can compare to. Not to mention that she is still injured, even if she recovers, she cannot catch up. Painful stomach cramps can only watch helplessly as the other person disappears without a trace. After confirming that she could no longer catch up with the other party, Yuyuan's swing slowed down and gradually stopped, leaving her lost and stunned in place. Fish Brother. Yuyuan murmured to herself before realizing that she had unconsciously followed Yugu too far and had already left the sea area just now. The sea area I am currently in is much deeper than before, at least Yuyuan can no longer see the seabed, and the small fish and shrimp around me have disappeared from sight since when. She seemed to be the only whale in the entire sea area. The blue and black seawater lay quietly beneath her, like the big mouth of an abyssal beast that could devour her at any moment. It was also like a monster's pocket, and at some point something terrifying would emerge from it. Yuyuan hurriedly averted her gaze, feeling as if a light was shining on her back and her heart was empty. However, looking away didn't make her much better. She always felt cold under her belly, and her mind involuntarily flashed with the abyssal seawater she had just seen. The more I thought about it, the more I felt uneasy in my heart. Gradually, my whole body became cold, and the whale froze in place, afraid to move any further. I used to often come across videos on small video apps that tested whether you had deep-sea phobia. At that time, I didn't feel anything scary watching the videos, but when I was really in the deep sea, especially sinking in the water. The longer it takes, the more I feel suffocated, with a feeling of being deeply trapped and unable to crawl out. Woo! Yuyuan's eyes soured and he couldn't help but choke out a voice. The unfamiliarity of leaving her original upbringing environment, the wounds on her stomach, and the fear of not daring to move her body, swept through her. Feeling aggrieved and frightened, Yuyuan lifted her side fins to cover her eyes, telling herself not to look at the bottomless sea beneath her anymore. She burst into tears like an outlet. Just as she was crying uncontrollably, the gloomy voice of the male killer whale sounded above her head. "Why are you crying?" He was about to completely get rid of this trouble just now, and finally prepared to leave this sea area with great determination. Unexpectedly, the next second he heard her crying. As usual, unable to control the volume, the heart-wrenching cries pierced through more than 100 meters of sea and directly entered my mind. The male killer whale is completely depressed, this trouble is not big, and his voice is not small. Whenever he wants to forcibly ignore the crying and leave, the troublesome crying will amplify by one, with a very strong penetrating power. After various hesitations, he finally turned back. Then I saw an unforgettable scene in my life, where a 6-meter-long killer whale almost rolled itself into a ball, hugging its head with both fins and trembling with tears. It's simply stunning for whales. The body of a killer whale is perfectly streamlined, but not soft. He has only seen this one in over a decade, as he can shrink himself into a ball. I tentatively raised my fins, trying to hold my head like this troublesome troublemaker who cried incessantly, but found that I couldn't do it at all. This kind of action fundamentally violates the physiological conditions of killer whales. Normal killer whales want to perform these actions unless they break all the bones and then remove some of their internal organs. The male killer whale almost instantly thought of the bloody laboratory and the various marine creatures modified in the solution. Looking at Yuyuan's gaze, it became sharp and then full of complexity. Upon hearing the voice of a male killer whale, Yuyuan felt relieved and immediately stopped crying. She sobbed and lowered her side fin, which covered her eyes. She looked up to see the killer whale reappear in front of her, with a hint of crying in her voice. She said awkwardly, I'm a bit scared. The male killer whale looked left and right and found nothing but water. He asked in confusion, "What are you afraid of?" Yuyuan's eyes flashed with embarrassment, and in the eyes of the other person's exploration, he ultimately decided to speak the truth, with a voice like a mosquito's roar. Cough. The water is a bit deep, I have deep-sea phobia. The male killer whale opened its mouth and didn't know what to say for an instant. Yuyuan felt a hint of regret in her heart, as most of her negative impression was because she didn't look like a normal killer whale, lacked abilities, and was embarrassing. Now I still tell him that she was scared to cry because the water was too deep. Yuyuan could already foresee that the other party was now filled with silence and quickly explained. I've never seen such a deep seabed before. The water was very shallow where I used to be. The male killer whale thought of the small and shallow water pools that had imprisoned him since childhood, and eventually felt a hint of pity for Yuyuan. He interrupted and hurriedly explained to Yuyuan. Alright, I got it. Oh. Yuyuan stopped in disappointment. At the same time, he secretly looked up at the male killer whale. Unfortunately, it was difficult to see the expression on the killer whale's face, and Yuyuan couldn't observe the other person's emotions. Later, she thought of the male killer whale, although he had shaken her off, but still came back, and a little hope rose in his heart. Well, instead of following behind stealthily, it's better to seek help openly. If rejected, you can also give up. Yuyuan cleared his throat and tentatively asked. Fish brother, that. I'm injured and not familiar with the surroundings. Can you let me follow you for a while? Without waiting for the male killer whale to respond, he immediately said. I don't eat free food, I can hunt and serve food. Before he could finish speaking, the male killer whale looked up and down at her with suspicion. Yuyuan felt guilty for a moment and coughed twice, shouting. I can learn. She repeatedly declared. Fish brother, I have a strong learning ability. As long as you teach me, I will definitely learn. After speaking, Yuyuan flattered and chuckled twice, with a tone that was both hopeful and cautious. Brother look, can we? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Companion Killer Whales. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Companion Tiger Whales. The male killer whale did not immediately speak, but kept looking up and down at her with his eyes, unconsciously pausing several times on the wound on Yuyuan's belly. Waiting so anxiously and long. If he had hands, Yuyuan wished he could put his hands together and give Fish Brother 2 kowtow on the spot to show his sincerity. After the injury is healed, leave immediately. The male killer whale's cold voice rang out. Yuyuan relaxed all over, breathed a sigh of relief, and his round eyes sparkled as he looked at the male killer whale, excitedly saying. Good fish brother. Then habitually send the other person a good person card. Fish brother, you are so kind. The male killer whale unnaturally dodged her buling sparkling gaze attack, quickly turned around, and said seriously. I'm not a fish, don't call me fish brother. Yuyuan exclaimed, and suddenly remembered that it had been so long since she knew the name of Yugu, so she tentatively asked. So. Can you tell me your name? And then take the initiative to report your home. My name is Yuyuan. The corner of the male killer whale's eye swept over Yuyuan's open mouth. Her kiss was more rounded than that of a typical killer whale, giving her a somewhat juvenile appearance. Coupled with her small size, it seemed like she was not yet an adult. I remembered the killer whale ball I just saw and felt that the name really suited her. It is indeed quite round. After waiting for a long time without a reply, Yuyuan tilted his head and said in confusion. Brother, you're not going to back out, are you? The male killer whale shook its head and said in a muffled voice. My name is Aki. Good fish brother. Yuyuan immediately responded. Ah Chi's eyes were filled with depression. Isn't this still calling fish brother? As she watched Yuyuan completely sweep away her fearful and trembling appearance just now, excitedly swinging her side fins, Aki didn't know what was going on, and couldn't help but relax in her heart. Feeling quite uncomfortable, she reiterated. I've agreed to leave as soon as you recover from your injury. I won't soften my heart. Okay. Yuyuan nodded like pounding garlic. Come with me. Aki turned around and swam in one direction, while Yuyuan followed him eagerly. This time, Yuyuan clearly felt Aki intentionally slowing down her speed, hardly swinging her tail, so that she could keep up. Yuyuan's eyes flashed with a smile. Although Yugo looked fierce, his solid foundation was very good. Otherwise, I wouldn't have saved her and returned to see her twice in a row. Unexpectedly, the kindness that was rarely received in human society has now been obtained from a killer whale. Yuyuan did not take Aki's help for granted. She knew that Aki would definitely have a lot of trouble with her. A severely injured killer whale is like a delicious meal, more likely to attract fierce predators. Thinking of this, Yuyuan quickly swung his lateral fins to follow Aki and enthusiastically chatted with him. Fish brother, do you know that I was so scared just now that I didn't dare to move? Fortunately, you came back to find me, and I breathed a big sigh of relief. Fish brother, do you know that I have never seen a killer whale as handsome and powerful as you before? I feel so safe by your side. Also, your hunting skills are so strong that I can't even catch those fish. Can you teach me how to do it? Fish brother. Fish brother. As she was so close, Yuyuan's loud voice became even more pronounced, causing Ah Chi's eyes to start to blur. Unfortunately, she still spoke a lot, chattering incessantly, and even getting louder as she spoke. Shut up. Yuyuan's fragmented thoughts finally ceased in a cold drink. Noticing that Aki had sped up without any trace, Yuyuan blinked and asked in confusion. What's wrong? Did you flatter the horse's leg? I quickly recalled what I had just said in my mind, wanting to find the willingness to provoke the other person, and then sadly realized that I had said too much, and could no longer remember what I had said. Aki took a deep breath and turned around to bump into Yuyuan, but then remembered the injury on her body and forcefully stopped moving. Yuyuan felt lingering palpitations about his big tail and couldn't help but step back a bit. He cautiously asked. Did I say something that shouldn't have been said? Aki paused and looked at Yuyuan with a pair of round eyes that looked at him with some fear, his tail stiffening. He couldn't bear to see Yuyuan's timid appearance the most. When he first met her, he only felt embarrassed about her, but now he knew he couldn't blame her. She must have suffered a lot in that place, and she has finally survived to this day, which is already very rare. So Aki slowed down her voice. Tiger whales have very sensitive hearing, and even the slightest sound can be easily captured. On the contrary, they are also very sensitive. You don't have to use so much force when speaking. Yuyuan understood, Fish brother is accusing himself of making noise. Not because he said the wrong thing to make the other person angry, Yuyuan breathed a sigh of relief, tried to lower his voice, and whispered. Brother look at this volume, how is it? Aki responded and then continued swimming in the same direction as before. Yuyuan silently followed behind him, and after the incident just now, she dared not speak anymore. Aki discerned the direction of the water, and the surroundings suddenly became incredibly quiet from the noisy environment. He was still a bit uncomfortable. The corner of her eye caught a glimpse of Yuyuan following behind her, her gaze wandering aimlessly in the surrounding water, seeming somewhat gloomy. Retrieving her gaze, Aki arched her body and opened her side fins along the water flow, as if gliding in the water. Her body gracefully curved over a curve. Upon seeing this, Yuyuan also followed his example and opened his side fins, feeling the rhythm of the water flow. His body suddenly became lighter, and the parade speed suddenly increased. Yuyuan's eyes lit up uncontrollably, she wagged her tail, and her body suddenly darted out. She turned back in surprise, as if seeking praise. "Fish brother, look." Then suddenly, it seemed like something was on my mind. The excited voice gradually decreased and then disappeared. Yuyuan felt a bit frustrated with herself, but just now she forgot to lower her voice and shouted out in excitement. But when she remembered lowering her voice, she realized that there seemed to be nothing to say and could only stare blankly at Aki, her mouth opening and closing, unsure of what to say. Unexpectedly, Aki swam to her side and said a faint sentence. "It seems that you haven't deceived me, your learning ability is indeed good." Just a simple compliment can make Yuyuan immediately sweep away her previously depressed mood and say happily. "Of course, fish brother, don't worry, I will definitely not deceive you. When I learn to hunt, I will definitely catch a lot of fish for you to eat." Aki averted his gaze from her bright eyes and whispered. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. You can make requests to me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. You can make requests to me. Yuyuan followed behind Aki for an unknown amount of time. After struggling, he finally hesitated and asked. Fish brother, where are we going anyway? It's not that she lacks patience, it's really unbearable pain. Even after learning Chi's swimming skills, she saved a lot of effort. After such a long parade, she was completely exhausted. Aki stopped and his gaze fell on Yuyuan's slightly trembling tail tip. Yuyuan couldn't help but shrink back, secretly cursing himself for the weakness and lack of success he had shown in front of Aki. He opened his mouth. "I'm sorry." The next second, my eyes turned black, and in front of me was Chi's enlarged face. Yuyuan's heart tightened as she instinctively closed her eyes and hugged her head with her fins. She didn't forget to lower her voice and shout softly. "Fish brother, don't fight." The expected heavy blow did not come, and Yuyuan trembled and opened his eyes. Immediately, he was empty, and a layer of smooth, delicate, and wide skin suddenly covered his stomach. His whole body moved forward uncontrollably, breaking through the water flow. Fish brother lifted her up. Aki continued to swim forward with her round body on her head, swinging her tail. He is over 9 meters long, with a strong and sturdy physique and a wide and powerful tail. He supports Yuyuan, a malnourished and weak killer whale that is only about 6 meters long, swimming forward, which is more than enough. Yuyuan lay dumbfounded on Chi's back. This was Chi's second time carrying her. This time she was clear-headed and couldn't help but become nervous. She hung her side fins on Aki's head and whispered. "Fish brother, I'm sorry, I really hurt too much." "Why apologize?" Chi's puzzled voice came from below. "What?" Yuyuan didn't react for a moment. "It's normal to be weak if your body is injured. If you can't bear the pain, you should tell me earlier. This is not an excessive request, there's no need to say, 'I'm sorry.'" After only half a day of getting along, Aki had already seen Yuyuan's cautious demeanor under the surface of his many words. She always kept apologizing. Although he mustered up the courage to ask for help from himself, he still trembled and was ready to be attacked or abandoned at any time. This type of personality is rare among killer whales, and mostly appears in wandering killer whales. They have no family to rely on, and can only live alone and struggle to find a new family. Even if they are lucky enough to be accepted by a new group of killer whales, they will still walk on thin ice. Because killer whales attach great importance to blood ties, each group of killer whales has their unique inheritance and hunting knowledge. Even if they accept new killer whales without blood ties, they will not quickly impart this knowledge to them. I won't immediately be close to him like family. Yuyuan herself is a wandering killer whale, perhaps she has even worse experiences than ordinary wandering killer whales. So it becomes smooth, hypocritical and passionate like humans, but with a more cautious and fragile heart. Yuyuan didn't know what Aki was thinking in her heart, but she still habitually apologized. Sorry, You asked me for help, and I agreed, so you can rest assured that I won't leave you until you recover from your injuries. During this period, you can submit your request to me, and if it is reasonable, I will not refuse. Aki's voice didn't have any ups and downs, as if to state another plain fact. Little did they know how shocking such words were for Yuyuan's weak soul. When she was still human, her parents had already divorced at a very young age, and her mother never returned, not even making a phone call to her. My father has a bad temper and is always enthusiastic about dating and drinking with different women. He rarely cares about her and lacks patience. He often scolds her at will. On the eve of her college entrance examination, her father married a new wife. That was also a difficult woman to get along with. After she lived on campus, she couldn't wait to change her room into a cloakroom, but her father didn't say a word about it. She once tried to cry to her father, but was always interrupted impatiently. She doesn't even have a place to go during school holidays, and can only sleep on the sofa when she comes home during the Chinese New Year. No, that's not her home. Later, her stepmother became pregnant again and gave birth to a younger brother. Her room changed from her stepmother's closet to her younger brother's room. This younger brother can be considered the only person in the whole family who can speak to her seriously. So no matter what my younger brother says, even if she is not interested, she will listen carefully. The years of suppressed life have made her accustomed to apologizing. Regardless of whether she did something wrong or whether she should apologize, she will subconsciously say, "I'm sorry." This will save her some blame. In fact, after Yuyuan became sensible, she never dared to trouble others. Today is the first time she has spoken the words of seeking help under the pressure of helplessness and fear. At that time, she didn't have much hope and was ready to be rejected. I didn't expect Aki to lend her a helping hand and say, "You can ask me for help." No one has ever said this to Yuyuan, they always keep asking her, constantly making demands on her, but never thinking about asking her what she wants. Yuyuan couldn't control herself and pressed her face against Aki's back, her voice choking up. "Fish brother, thank you, thank you. You're so kind, woo. Unexpectedly receiving gratitude, Aki's eyes flashed with a hint of unease. Although she didn't understand why Yuyuan wanted to say thank you, she still responded to her in a low voice. "We'll be at our destination soon, don't be so nervous." As Chi carried Yuyuan, he began to float upwards, and the dark seawater around him gradually turned into a light blue. He could see sunlight shining through the sea and directly into the water, sprinkling on them. The seabed with white fine sand slowly revealed before their eyes, adorned with rocks of various shapes and colorful corals. The aquatic plants swayed gracefully with the waves, and small fish and shrimp gradually entered their sight. Yuyuan can even see scallops swimming like butterflies flapping their wings above the fine sand bottom. The surrounding sea area seemed to become lively in an instant, and the cold and lonely sea when we were on our way just now seemed like an illusion. Yuyuan's fear slowly dissipated in her heart, and her body began to warm up, involuntarily letting out a sigh of relief. Aki could feel her tense muscles slowly relaxing, and she thought to herself that she was no longer afraid. So carrying Yuyuan to a clearing without coral or reefs, Aki let her down. Yuyuan's massive body floated lightly onto the fine sand at the bottom of the sea, soft and light, making her feel a sense of relief from the pain of the wound. Aki calmly surveyed the gap on Yuyuan's belly. It's not an easy wound to heal. He was already almost bitten through his entire stomach, and with Yuyuan's relentless and vigorous movements tearing at the wound, the injury had become very serious. The tattered skin and flesh float in the water, and the wound turns white from being soaked in seawater. If this continues, it is easy for the wound to rot. At that time, Yuyuan may die from a wound infection. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Aki's unproclaimed gentleness to the mouth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Aki's unproclaimed gentleness to the mouth. Yuyuan lay on the fine sand and didn't remember anymore. The whole whale was in a daze, struggling with energy in saying to Aki. Brother Yu, do we still need to continue on our journey? She tried hard to turn over and leave the warm sand bed. We have arrived at our destination, Aki said before she made the wound worse. In fact, he didn't originally plan to come here. Compared to such shallow water areas, he prefers to stay in the deep sea, where there will also be larger prey. But in the end, he came here with Yuyuan. Although Yuyuan didn't say anything, she seemed to be very afraid of the bottomless sea, her muscles stiff and tense all over, and her eyes were always unconsciously wandering around. This mental state is of no benefit to healing. After receiving a response that he didn't need to continue his journey, Yuyuan finally breathed a sigh of relief and allowed himself to lie on the fine sand surface again, habitually scanning the surrounding environment. I suddenly discovered that although there are many small fish and shrimp in this shallow sea area, there are also many corals and reefs, densely distributed in every corner, some of which cluster together. The place they were in without prominent terrain was the only one within her line of sight. These prominent reef corals are rough and sharp, easily scratching the smooth skin of killer whales, coupled with their numerous and crowded populations. She was still struggling to move freely, but for a larger body like Aki, she had to be careful to avoid moving. Yuyuan's innate meticulousness allowed her to almost instantly guess that this bustling sea area was not the place where Aki often came. Moreover, it took them such a long journey to arrive here, indicating that it is already the closest shallow water area to where they were just located. The reason why Aki came specifically to this sea area is already clear to all, it's because of her. Because he knew her fear of the deep waters, Aki chose to take her to this sea area that was completely unsuitable for his activities. Having guessed all of this, Yuyuan felt a warm current surging out of her heart. Aki's unspoken tenderness dissolved her confusion and unease a lot. Aki did not notice that the troublemaker was already moved to tears, but coldly ordered. Stay here and don't run around. This sea area will to some extent limit his movement, but due to the abundance of fish and shrimp, it is also a natural hunting ground for sharks and other predators. Their body size is much smaller than that of killer whales, and they can move freely in this area. Yuyuan, with a severely injured and lifeless appearance, was unlikely to gather and launch an attack on her if caught by a shark. After all, sharks are not picky eaters at all, and dying killer whales are a rare feast for them. So he must drive out sharks in advance before they approach here. Of course, it would be great if we could kill a few. Aki thought so, with a cold murderous intent flashing in his eyes. The shark corpse, which has been opened and pierced, is enough to intimidate some intelligent creatures. Before leaving, Aki glanced at Yuyuan again, thought for a moment, and then swam over. He thrust his head under Yuyuan's body, then lifted her back onto his body. Yuyuan's brain, which was originally drowsy and about to fall asleep, suddenly woke up. Immediately after, he found Aki pressing against her and rushing straight towards the sea. After a loud sound of water breaking, his skin came into contact with the cold air. Unable to control his body, he gave a stirring sound and heard Aki coldly spit out 2 words in the water. Breathe. Oh. Oh. Yuyuan suddenly realized and quickly discharged the exhaust gas from the pores, inhaling fresh air. Then Aki led her back into the water and sent her back to the soft sandy void. Don't leave here casually, Aki instructed again. Yuyuan hurriedly agreed. I know fish brother, don't worry, I definitely won't run around. Aki glanced around again, confirming that there were only some harmless tropical fish before turning around and leaving. Yuyuan looked at his departing figure and felt a bit reluctant in her heart, but she only persisted for a few seconds, and her stomach was already so painful that she had no time to think. At the same time, his eyelids became heavier and heavier, and Yuyuan thought in a confused manner, wondering if he would feel less pain when he fell asleep. There were indeed several sharks swimming leisurely in the water around, occasionally catching small fish that were brought to their mouths. A hammerhead shark clings tightly to the surface of the fine sand, searching for the shells and crabs buried in the sand, as well as the sea fish buried in the sand, and sucks in all the food. The water flow behind suddenly rolled up and down, and the hammerhead shark was hit by a huge impact force before it could dodge. Aki took advantage of the moment when the other person twisted their body left and right to turn over, and his huge tail slapped it directly, making it dizzy, and then pressed it above it, making it unable to turn over. Sharks must rely on swimming to filter oxygen from the water through their gills. Once pressed down, they cannot turn over, and the only outcome is to drown alive. This is one of the many hunting techniques used by killer whales. They always design different hunting methods based on different prey, summarize them into experiences, and teach them to future generations. After a fierce struggle, the hammerhead shark's movements became slower and slower. Finally, it convulsed violently, lost its breath, and slowly sank downwards. Aki tore open its belly, dug out its soft internal organs, and threw down the unpleasant and useless body. The remaining two sharks were hunted and killed by Aki Tong Tong, tearing open their stomachs and only taking away their internal organs. He bit on the dug-out organs in his mouth and planned to return directly to the place where Yuyuan was placed, but suddenly stopped after only a short distance of marching. Aki looked at the food he was biting, with a hint of regret in his eyes. Really, even though I had no intention of caring about that troublemaker at first, I not only told her that I could make demands on her, but also brought her to such a haunted place because she was afraid. Even bring her food back. Even though he didn't eat much today himself. This is simply contrary to his initial plan. The more Aki thought about it, the more regretful he became. He wished his big tail had hit his head a few times, and when he saw the food in his mouth, he spit it out. Angry, he swallowed the freshly torn viscera in big gulps. However, as soon as she ate a portion, Aki slowly stopped and turned her head to look in the direction where Yuyuan had just been placed. Finally, she picked up the food again and swam towards that place. Forget it, let her recover her injuries and drive her away as soon as possible, Aki thought with resentment, suddenly thinking again. He has been out for a while now, and Yuyuan just looked like he was struggling to move. Will he not have the strength to float to the surface for a breath, and finally suffocate himself? The possibility of this death method on juvenile killer whales is very low, but for Yuyuan, the possibility is high. After all, only half a day ago, she almost drowned herself. With this thought in mind, Aki ignored his anger and couldn't help but accelerate the pace of the parade. After finally returning to the empty space, at the moment when the scene in front of him caught the eye, Aki was stunned and stood still. The food in his mouth also slowly slipped down due to his shock, sinking into the fine sand. End of this chapter.